This Monday night, taking matters into her own hands. President Park's latest push to get lawmakers to pass a set of bills designed to revamp the nation's economy and protect Korea from possible terror attacks. Steps to revive denuclearization talks with North Korea and nuclear security are the main focus of South Korea UN joint conference in Seoul today. One of the key figures leading these discussions is with us in the studio tonight. And this was an act of terrorism, declares the U.S. president on the shooting in San Bernardino, California. His message, anyone who tries to harm the U.S. will be destroyed. NewsCenter begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. This is NewsCenter. President Park Geun-hye is putting the pressure on lawmakers to pass a number of crucial economy-related bills by this Wednesday. She urged the ruling Saenuri Party to help push things along. Otherwise, it could face setbacks in the upcoming general elections. Arirang News parliamentary correspondent Kim Young-gil starts us off.
The National Assembly's 100-day regular session ends this Wednesday, but before it does, President Park has pointed out a number of key items that need to be handled. She met with leaders of the ruling Saenuri Party to drive her message home.
President Park said Korean companies are finding it hard to compete in the global market due to economic uncertainties, and that Parliament should help businesses by passing economy-related bills. She urged for the Assembly's cooperation.
Rival parties had previously agreed to pass a bill to promote Korea's service industry sector, with the aim of restructuring the local economy, which heavily relies on manufacturing. But the opposition bloc is now concerned that the bill could promote the privatization of healthcare services, which the ruling party denies. There are also 5 labor reform bills that the president stressed needs to be passed before the end of the year.
The purpose of these labor reform bills is to create more jobs for the younger generation. They'll also help improve conditions for irregular workers and employees at small companies. There's no reason for the opposition to deny them.
Negotiations between the two camps were slated to continue in the next extraordinary session. But reaching an agreement won't be easy, with the tension quickly shifting to April's general elections. President Park also made clear to the ruling party leaders that it's high time they passed an anti-terrorism bill. She said public safety was at stake. The legislation, which was proposed in 2001, would put the nation's top spy agency in control of counterterrorism activities. It's faced roadblocks from opposition camps that fear the spy agency could potentially abuse the authority it gives them and infringe on human rights. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Well, one more agenda on President Park's itinerary today was calling for significant improvements in the export market, as the nation has seen figures dent in recent months on sluggish global economic growth. While this year wasn't a total wash, the president made clear that change was needed to get trade back on track. For this, here's our Kwon So-ah.
With Korea's exports and imports posting sluggish figures this year, it was no surprise that festivities were subdued at the 52nd Trade Day commemoration. President Park Geun-hye, who attended Monday's event, said slow global growth and stronger competition have made things tough.
독일, 미국 등의 제조업 혁신 정책, 불과 3.3년까지 좁혀진 중국과의 기술 격차로 중장기적 무역 여건도 쉽지 않은 상황입니다.
A year ago, participants of the 51st Trade Day were all smiles as Korea's 2014 trade volume exceeded the $1 trillion mark in the shortest span ever. But this year, and for the first time since 2011, Korea is expected to miss the target. So it raises the question, will exports still be the main driving force of Korea's economy? That's why President Park is calling on Korea's trade industry to diversify its export items, expand the role of small and mid-sized firms, and improve its competitiveness in main export sectors.
The FTAs with China, Vietnam and New Zealand are expected to take effect by the end of this year after very strenuous processes. I hope that the trade pacts will act like a vitamin to boost the export market next year.
But experts say it'll take some time before benefits really show.
There are especially high expectations for the Korea-China FTA, but in that case, trade liberalization isn't that high, and tariff eliminations are processed very slow, meaning the effects aren't likely to show up drastically next year.
Despite negative growth in outbound shipments every month this year, President Park pointed out that some significant achievements were made. Korea was ranked the 6th biggest exporter in the world, up a spot from last year, and was able to expand its market share in the world's 2 biggest economies, the US and China, while exports by SMEs continued its rising streak. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
In downtown Seoul today, the 14th South Korea UN Joint Conference on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Issues kicked off. In a video message to the conference, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for a global crackdown on weapons of mass destruction. Here's Arirang News' Kim Hyun-bin.
Through a video message on Monday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for greater efforts to remove all nuclear weapons from the world, that it is now the time to rid the world of these most destructive weapons. Ban added that the forum's agenda includes North Korea's nuclear weapons program and the implications of the nuclear deal signed by Iran and the global powers. He stressed that progress in these areas is vital to regional and global security. Seoul's Foreign Affairs Deputy Minister Shin Dong-ik says that over 98% of declared chemical weapons stockpiles in the world have been destroyed, but that over 16,000 remain, continuing to pose an existential threat to humanity. Shin also condemned Pyongyang for conducting 2 submarine-launched ballistic missile tests, calling them violations of UN Security Council resolutions. Last month, there was speculation that Ban was planning to visit the North, turning everyone's attention to his possible holding talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to better reduce tensions on the Korean peninsula. However, the UN's acting representative for disarmament, Kim Won-soo, told reporters on the conference sidelines that nothing has been confirmed and that the talks are ongoing. Ban has repeatedly said he will do everything possible for inter-Korean conciliation and resolving the North Korean nuclear issue. Should Ban visit the North, he will become the 3rd UN Secretary General to do so. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, one of the key discussion leaders at the 14th South Korea United Nations Joint Conference on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Issues is Lacina Zerbo, the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization based in Vienna, Austria. Well, he joins me live in our NEWSCENTER studio tonight. Mr. Zerbo, great to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Well, for those of us not in the know, why don't you first begin by explaining what this Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization is, what your main function is?
The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, its preparatory commission in Vienna, is set through its international monitoring system and its verification regime to verify compliance with the Test Ban Treaty. This is our main purpose. And to that effect, to put an end to nuclear test explosion. And this is why we're dealing here in the Korean Peninsula at a conference that is set for that.
Right, of course, because we've been seeing some nuclear explosions tests here on the Korean Peninsula. Now, as I briefly mentioned, and as you mentioned as well, you're here for the joint conference between South Korea and the United Nations on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Issues conference. This year's theme is Unfinished Business of Building a More Secure World. Have you made any progress to reviving the denuclearization talks with North Korea?
I think one of the things we agreed this morning was that there is a different way and a different approach that we should have with North Korea. First, find a way to resume the ceasefire talk, but how to do that? There are different views, but it is important to not isolate the North Korea. We have to bring them on the table to be able to discuss and then talk. And the success of the Iran deal sets or paved the way to different way of approaching those type of issue. We succeeded with a deal with Iran. I think we can, the same way, bring North Korea and the main leaders of this world to discuss this issue and then find a solution. If it takes to spend 4 weeks, like we did in Vienna, for Iran, we have to do the same for North Korea. And this is what we believe in.
So do you believe personally that a deal similar to that of Iran could actually take place with North Korea? Or are we talking about a different kind of a state?
Even if we have a different kind of state, a deal like what happened with Iran could happen with North Korea. Why did it happen? Mutual respect, sitting around the table, finding ways to find a solution, and deciding that we have 4 weeks to decide. We have a dead hand, and that dead hand we need to find a solution. This is what happened in Vienna. We can do the same with North Korea. We have to bring them on the table of discussion. We have to talk to them. I don't believe in isolation. The only way to bring them today is to resume to six-party talk and then bring our sister organization in Vienna back to North Korea to try and verify whatever needs to be done.
Right, the IAEA.
Absolutely.
What is CTBTO's stance on North Korea's nuclear ambitions? What about the nuclear security in North Korea?
The CTBTO stands on North Korea nuclear ambition. I mean, we have our role, which is banning nuclear test explosion. In this 21st century, North Korea is the only country to have proceeded to nuclear test explosion. 2006, 2009, and 2013. But three too many. Mm-hmm. We would hope that this never happen again. The 21st century is too civilized for any nuclear test explosion. There's no room for nuclear test explosion. Having said this, talking about nuclear security, we have to complement each other. I was talking about the International Atomic Energy Agency. Mm-hmm. We have to work closely. They do their part, we take our end, so that we verify the compliance with regard to their nuclear security aspect, and then for us to nuclear test explosion. And this is what we should do, and this is the only way forward. And the international community should include all parties to discuss this issue.
Sure. So also engaging North Korea in the talks to denuclearize that state. Are there ways for CTBTO to really step in and enforce a ban on North Korea from carrying out any kind of nuclear explosions test?
Your question boils down to the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Mm-hmm. When in force, the CTBT indeed would enforce a ban on nuclear test explosion on North Korea. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have an international monitoring system that is effective, a verification regime that is nearly completed, a verification regime and a verification system that has shown its effectiveness during the 3 announced nuclear test explosion by North Korea. But how to enforce this in the absence of a legally binding framework that put the entry into force of the CTBT? And this is why the entry into force of this treaty is more than relevant. We cannot go with a world free of nuclear weapons if we don't have a world free of nuclear testing.
Right. But we would need the willingness of North Korea in order for that to happen.
Indeed, we need the willingness of North Korea. I mean, that's why I was talking about mutual respect.
Right.
We have to engage them in a way where they feel comfortable. I think diplomat is here for that. And right. I think it happened the same way with Iran. It took years before the relevant party could sit around the table in Vienna mm-hmm. for 3-4 weeks and then to reach a conclusion. I think that's possible with North Korea. We have to find a framework. I've been at a discussion table in Russia at a conference where North Korea were participants. Mm-hmm. I had an opportunity to exchange a few words with them. I think we have to engage a way to build confidence and then to bring them on the table in a way where they agree to discuss the issue the way the international community wants.
Well, I think you've partly answered my question to my last question, which is, what are your prospects for a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, I guess, to ensure the nuclear security on the peninsula? What are your prospects on that?
I think I've said it already. I think we need a Korean peninsula that is test-free first, before we move on to a nuclear weapon-free, if any. I think I tend to refuse to take today a situation where we assume already that North Korea is a nuclear weapon country. They've done some tests. There's still a long way to go. I think we have to engage with them in a way where we understand their position, but we want them to join the international community. First, on the moratorium against nuclear testing, and then in a denuclearization process that will satisfy the expectation of the international community.
Let me add a question that might be a little bit difficult for you to answer. Do we foresee a nuclear test in the near future by North Korea?
I hope not.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. And hopefully not, but what I can say, our system, our international monitoring system, our verification regime are in place. We can detect, we can make the specification, the technical specification at the disposal of our state signatories, but we need the entry into force of the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, to enforce that law.
All right, Lacina Zerbo, Executive Secretary of CTBTO, thank you indeed for coming out to our studio and sharing your insights with us. We hope to see you again in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Pleasure. Thanks.
Another voice that could have told about the horrors of being a comfort woman, a sex slave used by Japanese soldiers during World War II, has fallen silent. Of the 238 Koreans registered as victims of the wartime crime, we bid farewell to another today, bringing down the number of survivors to 46. Choi Gap-sun died over the weekend at the age of 96. She was taken by a Japanese policeman at 14 years old to a so-called comfort station in Manchuria and spent 12 years as a sex slave. Che Halmoni, or Grandma Che's funeral procession took place early this morning. I went out to give voice to the silenced. At last, she's at peace. Che's funeral portrait shows a serene face with deep wrinkles, proof of the long, hard life she has had. Funeral wreath and sympathy flowers flood the hallways, the number far greater than the few people visiting the funeral home. Choi Gap-sun was one of 47 surviving comfort women, the euphemistic term for victims of Imperial Japan's systematic sexual enslavement of women before and during World War II. It's a small funeral. There aren't many mourners. But Che is one of the lucky few survived by family. The 96-year-old died in the early hours of Saturday at a nursing home in Seoul. She had been battling Alzheimer's, diabetes. She had poor hearing as well as vision impairment, says Che's granddaughter. Her father was Grandma Che's only child. He passed away 3 years ago.
My dad would always say, grandmother should pass before he does. That way he could feel at ease when his time comes. My grandma felt bad that she wasn't able to raise Dad with much love or give him a better life, but Dad had nothing but sympathy and pity for her and all the hardships she endured.
Like all other sex slavery victims, Che lived for nearly half a century after the war, in shame and silence, never speaking about what happened.
When it was first disclosed in 1991, my dad never said anything about it before then. My brother was shocked, I was shocked. Grandma was a comfort woman. I was surprised, but it's all in the past now. Better late than never. If we hadn't found out until she passed away, it would have been worse. We would have felt even more wronged.
Che was one of the very first sex slavery victims who circled the globe to share her experiences and testimony with the rest of the world. Up until a few years ago, when her health failed and she was bedridden, she toured universities across the U.S. to tell her shameful, painful past.
When she was younger and healthier, she never shared with us the details of her agony living as a comfort woman. As she became more ill of old age, she would tell us in bits and pieces. I don't think she ever told us the experience when her mental health was sound. Towards the end, it was more of her lamenting about her tragic life.
Since the early 1990s, Korea has been demanding that Japan acknowledge its wartime wrongdoings. For more than 2 decades now, they've demanded reparations and a heartfelt apology in vain.
우리 대통령께서 역대 어느 대통령 때보다도 이분들의 명예를 하는 데 관심을 가지고 계시기 때문에 모시겠습니다.
It's estimated that roughly 200,000 women from across Asia served as sex slaves for the Japanese troops. Of this number, nearly 9 in 10 were Korean, aged between 11 and 30. This is the 9th funeral procession we've seen this year alone. 9th for a victim of Japan's systematic sexual enslavement of women before and during World War II. Leaders of Korea and Japan have agreed to reach an agreement on the issue of comfort women as soon as possible, as time is running out. Well, time did run out for Choi Gap-sun today, for 8 others who died this year, and for the hundreds of thousands who passed away in the last 70 years without ever seeing justice. There now remain 46 who may or may not end up on this same path. Since coming to power in late 2012 after the death of his father Kim Jong-il, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has continually sought to consolidate his power. One of the young leader's methods is to instill fear among his inner circle by purging and executing close aides. Arirang's Connie Kim delves into the effectiveness of his methods and how he's seeking to stabilize the regime.
On December 13, 2013, North Korea announced that Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-thaek, who was then regarded as the second most influential man in North Korea, had been executed. Experts say Jang's removal successfully consolidated Kim's position after taking power in late 2012.
Back then, Kim's execution of Jang Song-thaek was an extreme method to take control of the regime for 20, 30 years. It was also to prevent any potential uprising against him.
The North Korean leader's elimination of his top aides continues. He had Hyun Young-chul, the country's defense chief, executed in April, and recently sent another of the nation's core elite, Workers' Party Secretary Choi Dong-hae, to a rural collective camp for so-called re-education. The Seoul-based Institute for National Security Strategy believes nearly 100 high-ranking North Korean officials have been executed since Kim took power some 3 years ago. That's 10 times more than his father, Kim Jong-il, had executed during the first 4 years of his rule. Some experts say that while Kim Jong-un's use of fear politics could generate backlash among officials, North Korean citizens' support for the young leader could contribute in stabilizing the regime.
Kim Jong-un is trying to win the minds of his people by boosting the regime's economy. Support among his people is the most important issue for Kim.
And this is why analysts believe Kim will focus on helping its people live in better economic conditions, possibly making it one of the key agenda items at the ruling Workers' Party's biggest Congress in May. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
5 South Koreans have made the cut to be included in Bloomberg's top 400 billionaires list. But here's the catch. The combined wealth of the 5 richest South Koreans exceeds the GDP of a reclusive state north of the border. Kim Min-ji has more.
South Korea's 5 richest people have more money than North Korea's GDP. According to Bloomberg's Billionaires Index, 5 South Koreans made the list of the world's 400 richest people. They are Samsung Group Chairman Lee Geun-hye, Amore Pacific Chairman Seo Kyung-bae, Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong, Hyundai Motor Group Chairman Chung Mong-gu, and SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won. Combined, their assets make up $36.4 billion. According to Statistics Korea data, that's more than 18% higher than the GDP of North Korea, which stood at just over $29 billion last year. These 5 make up almost 3% of the South Korean economy. To give the figure some context, Korea's richest person, Lee Geun-hye's wealth stood at $11.9 billion. That means he could buy 30,000 Ferrari 458 Spiders. The world's richest was none other than Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, whose assets stood at $83.4 billion. Owner of Inditex, a Spanish company that owns fashion brand Zara, Amancio Ortega ranks second, followed by Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
We're nearing the year's end, and that usually means it's time for some of 2015's biggest blockbusters to hit cinemas in Korea. Our Kim Ji-yeon has a rundown of the hottest movies to catch this December.
There are a lot of movies to look out for this winter. One of them is The Tiger, which centers around the Joseon dynasty's last tiger and the best gunman of the times, played by star actor Choi Min-sik. The movie cost nearly $15 million to make, most of which went into refining the computer graphics to make the tiger look as realistic as possible.
I really like the showdown between those who tried to preserve nature and those who wanted to destroy it for their own greed.
Another star of Korea's silver screen is Hwang Jung-min, who is starring in the upcoming film The Himalayas. It's a story about an expedition team that tries to recover their fallen colleague from the mountain range. Parts of the movie were actually filmed in the Himalayas, meaning production didn't come cheap.
I always think people power is the most important source of energy in a mountain. That's what I felt when I read the scripts and while shooting in the Himalayas.
The Magician is ready to draw in moviegoers at the end of the year. It stars Yoo Seung-ho, who's sure to win the hearts of female audiences. The movie plot centers around love and confrontation between top magicians during the Joseon dynasty. On the Hollywood scene, legendary actor Harrison Ford joins a mix of old and new stars in the highly anticipated release of Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
There's a high chance The Tiger and the Himalayas will be big hits in the box office this winter, as Korean movies have regained traction. It'll be a fight between Korean movies against the Star Wars movie.
Korean movies Assassination and Veteran both attracted more than 10 million viewers this summer. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The threat from terrorism is real and will destroy anyone or anything that tries to harm us. Those are the words from U.S. President Barack Obama in a rare televised national address from the Oval Office. This comes after a radicalized Muslim couple killed 14 people in a mass shooting in California last week. Our Kwon Jang-ho brings us the details.
Underlining the gravity of the nation's concern following last week's mass shooting in San Bernardino, President Barack Obama addressed the nation from the Oval Office for only the third time since taking office. He began by acknowledging that the shootings were an act of terrorism, but that so far there has been no evidence of overseas influence or of a larger cell in the U.S.
The threat from terrorism is real, but we will overcome it. We will destroy ISIL and any other organization that tries to harm us.
The president went on to lay out his plans for defeating ISIS, including continued use of airstrikes, providing assistance to local forces, and working with international allies on military action and intelligence. But he ruled out deploying ground troops to fight ISIS in Syria or Iraq.
But they also know that if we occupy foreign lands, they can maintain insurgencies for years, killing thousands of our troops, draining our resources, and using our presence to draw new recruits.
He also called on Congress to address issues on gun control.
Congress should act to make sure no one on a no-fly list is able to buy a gun. We also need to make it harder for people to buy powerful assault weapons, like the ones that were used in San Bernardino.
Republican presidential candidates were quick to criticize Obama on social media. They rebuked this speech as disappointing and lacking a clear or new strategy. Last week's shooting, along with the terror attacks in Paris last month, has shaken the U.S. A recent CNN poll showed that the majority of Americans felt the nation's military response to the terrorist groups has not been aggressive enough, and that now over 50% support sending ground troops to Syria and Iraq to fight ISIS. Whether Sunday's speech is enough to reassure those people remains to be seen. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Venezuela's opposition has taken over parliament for the first time in 16 years. The Democratic Unity Party's election victory over the ruling Socialist puts the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, in a vulnerable position. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, tell us about the outcome of the election.
Hello, Konyang. This is a huge victory for the Democratic Unity Party. The votes are still being counted, but so far they've won nearly 100 seats in parliament. That's an easy majority over the ruling camp. A handful of districts still have to be counted, but this is by far the worst defeat for the left-wing Chavismo movement, which was founded by former President Hugo Chavez.
Well, the victory sounds very lopsided.
It was, and this largely has to do with Venezuela's struggling economy. The country has the world's highest inflation. As well as that, there's many product shortages that are being blamed on Maduro. So the Democratic Unity Party really capitalized on that discontent. In his own words, Maduro blamed the economic war against him on his defeat. But likely to keep the peace, he was quick to say, rather admit, his party lost.
I recognize these adverse results and accept them and tell our Venezuela that the Constitution and democracy have won. We accept the results exactly as the electoral authorities have issued.
Votes are still being counted, and various opposition sources predict they could win as many as 113 seats. If that's the case, it would give them a critical two-thirds majority needed to restructure the courts and other institutions. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter has announced he's cancer-free. He told members of his church in Georgia Sunday that his latest MRI brain scan showed no signs of cancer. Carter began treatment in August for melanoma that had spread from his liver to his brain. He said he'll continue immunotherapy treatments, but all of the original cancer spots are gone.
But he survived, and he lived long enough to see me. So a lot of people prayed for me, and I appreciate that. So that's what we've been doing, but I wanted to tell you the good news, because that happened this week.
Carter played a crucial role in Middle East peace talks while he served as president. He's known for his human rights efforts and won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2002.
Well, not only is he known for his negotiations with the Middle East, but he's also known as playing a critical role in negotiations with North Korea.
Yeah, after he finished his presidency in 1994, he went to North Korea and met with Kim Il-sung as tensions were really high between Washington and Pyongyang. And more recently, he's intervened on the behalf of Americans that are being held captive by North Korea.
Right. Well, you know, he's played some good things and good parts, and we're really happy to see that he is now cancer-free.
At 91, it's incredible what he's still doing.
Right. Thank you, Bruce, for that, and we'll see you tomorrow. Well, conditions here in Korea are relatively pleasant for this season. It's warm enough, but over in China, things are not looking good, especially with Beijing being covered in toxic smog once again. For details, let's go to Jihan.
Hello, Ganyang. You're right. The situation is pretty serious in the Chinese capital as it has been engulfed in a dense cloud of hazardous PM 2.5 dust particles, prompting Beijing to issue its most severe smog warning this evening, the so-called red pollution alert. And high level of toxic smog will likely to remain for the next 3 days. And for those in Korea, keep in mind that the toxic smog will indirectly affect the western parts of the peninsula due to winds from the northwest tomorrow. But other than that, the whole nation will continue to have mild winter conditions under bright skies, and both lows and highs will be way above the seasonal averages. So first, let's take a look at tomorrow's lows. Here in the capital, we'll start out at -1 to 4. Daegu and Busan and Jeju will start out their day at 7. And afternoon highs will pick up to double digits, but for here in the capital will only rise to 9. 12 for Daegu, and Busan and Jeju will see a high of 15 and 13. Now the weather outlook for this week looks pretty nice, with the mercury to remain above the seasonal averages under a fair amount of sunshine, but keep in mind that there is a rain in the forecast for the later half of the week. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, Dog Sleighs, that's a way to kick off this Monday night. I'm Moon Gan-young. Thanks everyone for watching, and we hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.